Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Faryal Razak, and we are here with our emotional well-being series. And today we have with us the field's research executive, Miss Amna Siddiqui. Miss Amna Siddiqui has won a prestigious Erasmus Mundus scholarship, and she went on to Netherlands and Germany to complete her master's program in neurosciences. We are very lucky to have her with us, and today we're going to talk about a very stigmatized emotion called anger. And this is an emotion that we sometimes feel hostage to. Most of us, and no person on the planet can deny that they have not been hijacked by this emotion. So before I begin, what is anger, how it is generated, and let me take the advantage and collect some wisdom from Miss Amna for the biology and the neuroscience of anger. So, Assalamu alaikum, Amna. Welcome to the show. And
Walaikum
please,
salam.
a little bit introduce yourself, and then let's come to the topic of the day.
Thank you. Introduction to Thorbat Hoge. Thank you for the introduction. You're right. I completed my master's in neurosciences from Netherlands and Germany. And I did some research in old age psychiatry and some research in epilepsy. But right now I'm working with the field as a research executive, so covering a lot of things related to neurosciences and how neurosciences and emotions are part of this whole wild thing we call being a human. So if we talk about the neuroscience of anger, let's start with what actually is emotions. What's the biology of emotions? When we all emotions have two components. So the first is the outward unconscious physical expression, which, in anger, that is mostly like shaking with anger or shouting. And the second is the subjective internal expression, and that is actually our conscious awareness of what anger is as a bodily emotion. So when we consider anger from a neuroscience perspective, I'll talk a little more about it in detail, but the first is we start from the bottom up. So the first is this stimulus, as external sensory stimulus, which is outwardly shown as our anger response in the body. And it depends on the valence and the intensity of the emotion of your anger can vary from situation to situation, and it depends on individual experiences. And the second thing that occurs is your brain mediates the response as how intense is the emotion and how do I need to react and how aware I am of the emotion. And with that, I think Dr. Faryal can shed some more light on the emotional aspect and what it actually causes in the body, the emotion itself.
Actually, Amna, what we know about through research about anger is anger is not a primary emotion. It's a secondary emotion. It is always in response to some other unresolved issues that you have. So, for instance, if you're very angry with your children or your boss or your co-worker, so there has been maybe some neglect or some thing that which is unresolved in that, and you feel that you have been compromised and you have not been given your right, and you feel frustrated and not being heard or whatever, and it bottles up and it manifests itself as anger. So we need to understand first that anger is a secondary emotion, and anger is not bad per se. I mean, no emotion for that matter is bad per se. It is trying to tell you something. But since anger is so much stigmatized that we have never come in term to understand and really find some coping mechanisms. So there are two types of angers. Whenever you are faced with a certain situation, you find yourself angry. So you see that there are two types of persons that there are. And first type of persons we call erupters, who just respond to the situation instantaneously. Like Amna can guide you better, your sympathetic nervous system, that this is how you have trained your brain to react to the stimulus that is given. And the other people are, we call stuffers. It's those people who try to avoid it. They try to acknowledge it, that there's nothing such thing. So they try to suppress anger and do not try to. So one thing we really need to understand here, like Amna has just told, that it's a brain chemical reaction, a whole physiological. So you just can't deny an emotion, because the physiological response has been generated in your body. So this thing has to pass through your system. So if you give it a very unnatural thing, Amna can shed better light on that, how it can bring havoc to your body if you don't let those hormones that were generated, and you don't let them pass through your system. It is going to affect your health. And the studies or anger says that it compromise your immune system. Not only it compromise your immune system, it can bring havoc in your life, for your well-being. So please, Amna, I would like you to shed light on that aspect, that if you hold that feeling, what happens then?
Hmm. So it's interesting that you mentioned how people can sometimes suppress their anger and sometimes they're erupters and they just blow out of the situation after proportion. So one of the things that I was looking at, so there are three things that you can do, for example, to avoid being a very angry person. And those actually include, you don't have to suppress your anger, because if you don't acknowledge your anger, you are suppressing those feelings, and those can manifest in other very bad ways. And the second thing is, when you think about people, oh, I can just punch this pillow and just vent my emotions in some other way, just vent my anger, that is also not actually very good. You should not vent your anger out in a destructive way on different objects, but you need to distract yourself. Distracting means that you are allocating your brain's operating capacity to different things. So you are not you are distracting yourself, so your emotions are being used in a completely different path. And this third thing is, you need to reappraise the situation. For example, if somebody is about to punch you, you are angry, you are frustrated, just reappraise the situation and think about, oh, maybe this other person is also having a bad day. Maybe this other person is going through something tough, is doesn't know what I've been through. Reappraise the situation and think of the situation in a different way. When you do that, you are able to analyze and think, oh, maybe my reaction, my retaliation is not warranted for. And when we talk about
Very true.
the brain and its the what actually happens when you feel angry, one of the things that mediates this behavior is frustration. Frustration is actually recognized as one of the main triggers for anger. You may be frustrated when you continue to do something, continue to do an action, and you expect a reward, but that does not actually happen. You do not receive that reward. That is one of the main factors for frustrations. And we actually see from scientific studies on different psychopathic behaviors that people who are able to alter their response behaviorally, those they can do that through behavioral extinction. So when we see animal studies in neuroscience, when we start to extinct that behavior in an animal, for example, they can alter their behavioral response. But people who cannot alter their behavior, who continue to be frustrated about those things, they show increased risk for psychopathic frustration-based retaliation and aggressive behaviors. The second thing that causes frustration is when you expect another person to be instrumental in making you achieve your goal. So this other person is not behaving or is not doing things that would actually make a reward possible, then you get frustrated. And then frustration can be, of course, subjected to that person as well. So you are angry at the other person as well. You're frustrated at yourself, you're not receiving the reward, and then you're frustrated at the other person as well. So, and actually these social behaviors, the same neural architecture is used in this frustrating behavior as when you are in a non-social frustrated situation. So your brain is not seeing whether this is social or a non-social behavior. You are just plain frustrated. So the neural architecture is the same. So that's why people can be a little bit rude when they are angry. And
Very true.
yeah. So when we've talked a lot about emotions and fear, anxiety, stress in through our live streams and whatever, and so we know a little bit about the brain. So we know that the amygdala is one of the main uh, uh, part of the brain that is involved in emotion and manifesting emotions. So the part of the brains that are involved in an aggressive behavior, that is usually correlated with anger, as we cannot actually study anger in a neuroscientific way directly, but that's how we know that it's a secondary emotion. So we usually see aggressive behavior as one of the main correlates of anger. And so the brain regions involved in that are the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and the periaqueductal gray, which maybe I can show you here. So we have, yeah, yep, yeah. So yeah, it's okay, it's fine. So we have the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the brain region involved in the basic threat system, and then that is activated. You feel threatened, and you express anger. And the regions that are in turn regulating these responses are your frontal cortex. So it allows the gradation of the individual response and relative aggression. So yes, you do express anger as a first aggressive response, but then your brain, your frontal cortex, your executive functioning allows you to assess the situation. And if you are a mentally, emotionally healthy person, you may be able to regulate your anger in a healthy way and reappraise the
So, so,
situation. Yeah.
so let me clear here that anger is not an entity. Like Amna has just said, that it is a response that brain creates, and then it's not
Yeah.
an entity. You become angry. You are not anger. I mean, you become angry. You allow it to happen to you. So we need to
Mm.
understand that there are two ways that we can I can deduce from that talk, is that there are two ways, that either you can respond, and which is like amygdala hijack, because what have you stored the reactions over the years, how you have catered the anger, and how you have given your habit brain, so it is then your rational brain is shut down. And then
Mm.
delayed response, the other thing is delayed response. So
Mm.
whenever you're very angry, the best strategy is to just pause, just pause for a
Yes.
minute, because the emotions usually do not have a life of more than few minutes, so
Yeah.
they will surpass. So if you just pause, like let's say for like 3 to 6 minutes,
Mm.
you can rethink, and then like Amna said, that your rational brain can reactivate itself, and you
Mm.
don't want to. And there's something, there's an intermittent explosive disorder. I would like to talk about that here as well, because it's genetic. And it happens that
Mm.
if you do not understand, and it's a proper disorder, and you need to go to take help. And what is that, that if it is high frequency and low intensity, and by low intensity we means like you have two anger episodes per week for 3 months. And when we says that episodes, we mean that out of blown proportions. The thing wasn't like your child just drop some water and you just lose your mind. So this is not a normal situation and a normal reaction. And then
Mm.
you need, if it is a persistent thing and you lose control, you need to go and see some help here. And then there
Mm.
are low frequency and a high intensity situation, where like you blow your mind. In the first situation you might be cursing and you might be shouting, or you're not hurting anybody or the property, but in this case you might be hurting somebody or the property. You're breaking dishes, and if this thing is like, if you have three manic episodes like that per year,
Mm.
So you
Mm.
might be having this, I mean, per year. If you
Yeah.
lose your mind 3 times in a year, then you might be having this, what we call it IED, which is a intermittent explosive disorder. So there are sometimes, if it is a high frequency, you need to take some medications as well. So don't let anger take you to this arena of disorders, where you actually, your brain, anatomy, and the internal composition has started
To
altering.
change.
So yeah, you can't let that happen, because
Mhm.
with anger, a lot of hormones are generated, which are going to change the chemistry in
They
your
are
brain,
harmful to
in
your
your
brain,
body
and
as
they
well.
can. Yes.
So they will be released in your body in the form of some sort of illness, or damaging some of the
Mm.
organs, because excess of any emotion, and the subsequent release of chemicals and all the hormones is not good for you. So quickly, towards the end, let's wrap it up, and
Mhm.
let me give you first my tips, and then we'll ask Amna to give her last few thoughts on that. So whenever, excuse me, whenever you're confronted with anger, first of all, breathe, because at that time it's easier said than done. But breathing is to control yourself, to be mindfulness of what's going inside you and what's going out around you. And then you should name what is it. Are you angry or frustrated or
Mm.
disappointed or feel abused or whatever? You name that emotion, because it's very
Yes.
therapeutic. And when you name that emotion, only then you can do it differently. Because
Mhm.
now, if you see this whole situation compassionately, it releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone that makes you feel good, feel love, and compassion. Be compassionate about it. So this is why we always teach that be kind. Compassion is the key to the solution to humanity. And otherwise, it releases a lot of cortisols. So you have to mitigate those cortisols, and being compassionate lowers the cortisol level, which are create stress in the body and a lot of
Mm.
host of other chain reactions. And
Mm.
then you have to inquire, and this is the time to ask yourself, what was it actually that was perplexing you in the first place. And this is with that I leave that, try to journal it and find the triggers. So it's very
Mm.
important to find your trigger point and be prepared. And how can we do that? Number one, delay your response. Don't
Mhm.
immediately act, and anticipate the situations that can make you angry, like a confrontation with your partner, or somebody that you see that you can escalate to anger. So you need to practice in your mind what things, and then resolve the conflict, because
Mm.
most of the time in relationship management, we see that the conflicts are not resolved. So whenever we are confronted with the same situation, it's um, back to square one again. So it's
Yes.
very effective. And with that, I leave Amna for the end note. And it was pleasure, Amna, to have you here. And please, I would like that you give some good
Yeah.
tips to the our.
No, thank you for having me. No, I think you summarized it pretty well. I'll just repeat what I said earlier. The basic things are you don't need to suppress that emotion, that anger. You need to acknowledge it. And then venting does not help. And the second, as Dr. Faryal mentioned, you're delaying the response is very crucial, because the moment your brain is out of does not react in a sensible way, then it's very difficult to come back from the situation. You can, but it's very difficult. And then reappraise the situation, be empathetic, be compassionate, see what the other person where the other person is coming from, and maybe you can respond to the your anger and aggressive outburst in a more responsible and a more human way. And with that, I think we should yeah, I just want to
Very, very
conclude.
well said. And let me explain one thing else, that ventilation, we call it ventilation fallacy.
Yes,
Venting of anger is known as ventilation fallacy. It's the biggest fallacy of all. If you express your anger would be lowered. No, it is escalated. So venting
yes.
your anger is the most dumbest thing you
Mm.
can do. during an anger situation. So your response has to be calculated and well thought of. Otherwise,
Yes.
you're going to land yourself in trouble or the people around you in trouble. So you don't
Yes.
want to
Yes.
do that. And this is why it is a stigmatized emotion, because it can very quickly go out of hand and lead to a lot of very disruptive and rage and up to homicidal as well. So this is
Yes.
something that you really need to keep in check. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, in the end, like we always said, be kind, be compassionate, be empathetic. The world would be a nicer place. With that, take really good care of yourself and have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.